to the Talking Heads podcast. This is our first show of 2025. And God, I don't think we've done this since late summer 2024. So kind of good to be back. We've got our usual panelists. We've got Kurt Cornwell out of Detroit. And we've got Michael Perez out of Toledo, Ohio, right?
Yes.
Okay, I keep forgetting. I'm like, Ohio, I know it. Mike Yuskiw from South Carolina.
Yes, sir.
All right. Got the band back together. So we've got a topic today that I'm gonna let Kurt actually introduce. However, Yuskiw, we got to handle the legal shit. So
yeah, I'm somewhat excited tonight because it's we got to get there's some serious stuff, but it's some good news too. But let's get the serious stuff out of the way first. So attention, JKD community, warning. This video may contain words like Kali, Eskrima, Arnis, FMA, or Panatukan. Attention, FMA community. Warning, this video may contain words like Kali, Eskrima, Arnis, FMA, or Panatukan. Thankfully, for our viewers at home, you can now get yourself a Quack Sensor 2000. That's right, guys. The Quack Sensor 2000 censors out triggering words by adding a simple quacking sound in its place. Now, words like can be edited out and you won't even hear them. And if you act now, Quack Sensor will kindly throw in the Asian variety language pack so you can feel safe, that your ears be protected and in good hands. Isn't that amazing, guys? I'm so glad that Quack Sensor reached out to us. It takes a village, doesn't it, guys? It really does. All right, here's back to you, Kurt.
Finally, we got our first sponsor.
Yes, I'm telling you, good stuff. All right,
hard work pays off. It's true what they say.
No, I'm telling you. So they gave me one for Christmas, and I've been using it, and I'm telling you, my ears, they're pure virgin like the driven snow. It's amazing. Couldn't recommend one more.
And I think it was also trying to sell you some supplemental insurance too, right?
That's correct. That's right. I didn't go for that.
All right. Well, our topic tonight is a really interesting one. I was going to look it up and I forgot. But Kurt, this is a topic Kurt posted on, I think it was FMA discussion. And I went, whoa, okay, I could write books on this. So maybe we should do this as a podcast topic. So I messaged him and he went, yeah, I had this idea. Just want to see how the reception on it. So Kurt, we'll let you introduce the topic tonight.
To be honest with you, I'm well aware of what it is, but I'm looking up right now while we're talking just to make sure we're kind of zeroing in on the individual points.
What did I say?
Well, and
you'll remember
as off mic, and my family's been sick, so I've been a little bit playing catch up a little bit. So, but it was just something that's always perplexed me or frustrated me, and at the same time has always just been a curiosity of mine. In broad strokes, the question that I put into the I Love Jeet Kune Do group on Facebook was, at what point do we, as students of our teachers, at what point do we kind of step out on our own, right, and take some ownership over the material that we teach, that we've been taught, that we've learned, and at what point is it appropriate, or perhaps does it remain inappropriate, to brand that information that we've been given from others and present it as our own. The way that I tried to pose the question was, what do we mean when we all say it's through that person's filter? Part of the reason I started with that question, because I rewrote it to start with that question, was because I knew everyone's response was going to be, well, it's all through everyone's filter. Like, yeah, I know. Like everything I try to say in these groups, I'm like, some of this stuff goes without saying. It's kind of a given. But so since that is the case, it is true that everything goes through everyone's filter. That's true for all communication. That's true for all human interaction. What do we mean in this context of, I'm going to teach, let's say, in an FMA context, which is really what I was kind of thinking about in that particular instance. Let's say I'm teaching a sword and dagger drill, kind of a longer form drill that I learned from, I was trying to be kind of cagey about who I was referring to online, but I'll just say the part out loud. Let's say Guru Nasano has taught us through various seminars this drill set, okay? And so everyone in this chat has learned this same drill set from Guru Inosanto, maybe multiple times in multiple ways, with A, B, C, all the way through X, Y, Z variables attached to it. We've all had the same information. We've all been fortunate enough to train from the same person. He got it from this teacher, this teacher, this teacher. Maybe he even assimilated those moving parts into something and then was kind enough to give it to us. Now, I or someone else goes out and I say, oh, I'm going to do my brand of Kali or Eskrima or Jeet Kune Do or whatever your art is. And I'm going to give it a cool name. It's probably some word I'm going to look up in Google Translate. That's Tagalog, or it's Cantonese, or it's whatever. It's, you know what I mean? And I'm going to slap that as a label on it. And I'm going to say, this is my style of FMA. This is my style of JKD. This is my style of boxing. And then I proceed to teach the stuff that I learned at the seminar that you guys were at. Right. And so is that truly my style? Is it truly my expression? Is it really my FMA, my JKD, my whatever? Or is it not the person who taught it to me? And do we then have a kind of ethical, moral responsibility to say, as part of my methodology, as part of how I teach, I learned this from Dan Inosanto. I learned this from person X, person Y, person Z. This is their thing, and it has always suited me well. I think it's a really great teaching and learning device, so I included that in my curriculum. I don't usually see it presented that way. This is why I should have just read what I wrote, because I'm being too long-winded. But I don't usually see it presented that way, in the sense of, usually what I have observed is people taking ownership. This is my thing. This is my style, my method, my lesson, my school, my brand, my virtual program, my whatever. And you stop and you go, how is it that if it's your thing, I taught that same thing last night in class? So isn't it our thing, or rather, isn't it our teacher's thing? And do we have a responsibility to cite those sources in that way? And if not, what is the threshold we cross wherein we're kind of authorized from a community standpoint to take ownership and say, no, this is mine now, and I'm just going to call it what it is. And that's it. Good night. See you guys. All right.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
No, I like that. That was I'm glad that you kind of restated it that way. That was good. So I think that we do have a responsibility to kind of say where it came from. So I think for like marketing purposes, somebody could kind of like say, okay, well, my class is this, I'm going to rename something, whatever. But right when you open up the first page, it should actually be shouting at you where those things came from, right? I mean, think about, Tim's curriculum. You don't have to look far to know exactly where your curriculum. I mean, even the language is what's, I think, also where this naturally flows to, where what you call things. Like, would we rename certain things just for the sake of calling it something different? When, like rebranding something that everybody knows is called like Heaven 6. Rebranding it, is it necessary to call it something else? No. So then you also have to sort of pay homage to where it came from. So I think it might be okay to rename something, but still be honest that this is all of the sources that I'm getting it from. I just have a little jazzy name because you're in my class under this roof, right?
Yeah, and it's the the authenticity, the honesty, the sort of what I would call like brutal authenticity is the thing that really makes me gravitate to a teacher the most, right? And I don't know if I get that by virtue of being a student of somebody like Rick Fay, or if I gravitated towards him as a teacher because of this, chicken or the egg, right? Looking back, I'm not quite sure, but I do know it's a lesson learned from him over the years, because he is always a finger pointing to the Dan Inosanto moon. You know what I mean? He's or Larry Hartzell or Ajahn Chai or whomever else, Francis Fung, his teachers and people that have been of influence to him. He's always been a bridge builder for his students to access the information that his teachers had. He also came up in an era, as a lot of our teachers did, where they didn't have the ease of access that so many people today have. Right? They had to travel to the Smoky Mountains and do those camps. They had to travel to the Inosanto Academy or whatever it was called at that time, in the 80s, and do these 8-week camps. And, they really had to go and seek this information out. They had to save money. They had to travel, bring it back home and teach it to their friends or their students or whomever, because it was not available. There was no internet. There's no FMA school in your neighborhood. It just was not a thing. So they're, we come from a generation, the four of us, where we're one generation or one or two generations past that. Our leaders, our more immediate instructors, were bridge builders between the source, and we're therefore really, really, I think for the large part, really honest about that, or at least my experience with my teachers, they've been really honest about it. And so like that's a thing that feels natural to try to pay forward and to try to have that authenticity always front and center, right? And it also, maybe this is a good place to start this question for you guys. I think as a teacher, if you want to make your mark in a bigger way, and especially online, if you're trying to like present yourself in that capacity, short of name dropping and being kind of, I'm just going to say it, kind of douchey about it, aligning yourself with the bigger names that have come before you is not a bad thing, right? To call it what it is. I learned this from Dan Inosanto. I learned this from Remy Presas. I learned this from whomever, you know what I mean? You're able to go like, yeah, because I did the time. I worked with that person. I'm their student in some capacity. I did learn this. Why would you not want to highlight that?
It's like a
And
bad.
instead, are you trying to build an air around yourself? Like, did you grow up in some, nomadic mountain warfare tribal community? Like, you're from Cincinnati or you're from Southfield, Michigan. You're from what, you know what I mean? Whatever. Just like picking random places, like, what are we even talking about here? We all know where you learned that because we were at the same seminar with you.
Right.
Right.
All right.
Yeah, it's an honor to sort of show where you came from, the lineage, right? People should be honored about from their lineage is something important, right? They should honor it.
Yeah, I would think we have all of us sought out the opportunities in one fashion or another to be able to train with those people, right? To be able to train with a Dan and Son or whomever else. And because it's an honor, because it's a privilege and a blessing to be able to do that. So how odd then to say, well, the buck stops there, now I want the honor and the prestige to be about me, right? We have nowadays an expression that I really appreciate. I wish it had come about earlier, was that like main character energy. You know what I mean? Like it's just everyone's kind of insisting, yeah, I agree, you should be the main character of the film of your life, but it doesn't mean you're the main character of everyone else's, And there seems to be this huge sprint and priority towards making sure everyone around me recognizes I'm one of the stars of this picture. And I don't know how that helps push the envelope forward. But my question is to you guys, one, if we want to speak on this individually, what are your thoughts on it? How important is it to give credit wherever you think it's due? And then we're done. I'll say my piece on it. Give credit wherever you think it's due. And at what point is one empowered to just go, you know what? I don't have to do that anymore. I've done that enough or whatever. I'm just going to own this. This is mine now. And I'm going to allow myself to kind of be the man going forward.
Perez, why don't you start?
Well, morally, I think it speaks on your integrity and ethics. I mean, it's not like if I'm driving in a car that I'm just sitting there and I explain to someone, oh yeah, my dad taught me how to drive. That's why I drive this way. When you're talking about something as far as educating someone, I think it's important and morally important to give credit to where you learned that from. To impart on those students that knowledge and to talk about the sources. Yes, it's ours because we learned it, and obviously all knowledge is self-knowledge. But you also want to give credit to where you've gotten that knowledge from, those sources. I think it speaks volumes as far as your integrity goes to do that. Instead of just sitting there saying, oh yeah, I created this and this is mine, I did this. Well, yeah, you do it, but you had to get it from somewhere. Just like getting a degree from a university. You just didn't show up and they hand it to you. You actually had to put the work in. So, I think that speaks a lot on your integrity, your work ethic, that you put the time in order to develop that knowledge before you went out on your own in order to teach other people.
Yeah, I really like the driving analogy, by the way, is a great way to put that, because as part of this, there is the fact that nobody can own a jab, nobody can own a cross, nobody, there are things that are universal that everybody does, and so everyone is naturally allowed to say, to do those things without having to cite, yeah, my dad taught me how to drive. So every time someone gets in Mike Perez's car, he's got to point out, oh, my dad taught me how to, like, no one wants to drive
Right.
anymore, bro. We get it. You know, this is weird, you know. And so there are universal things, you know. However,
Yes.
I would attach to that, and I think it's in line with exactly what you're saying. If you then opened a driving school called Michael Perez's Totally Unique Style of Driving,
God help
and
us.
your dad was a famous driver, you know what I mean? Your dad is a famous race car driver, and you're doing what your dad taught you, then everyone would be like, it's not Mike Perez's unique race car
Right.
driving. You know what I mean? Like, we know
Yeah.
who your dad is, bro. It's Mike Perez Senior's driving. What are we talking
Right.
Plus,
Right.
he's driving steering the car with his feet and pushing the pedals with his hands. It's kind of like the way the rest of us are fucking doing it.
Exactly. And the elephant in the room is everyone knows who taught you. So it's a bit odd to project this air of this is my unique style or whatever. Or, you know, I have 5, 6, 10 different driving teachers, but everything you teach is your dad's style of driving. And we all know because we all learned from him too. You know what I mean? Like, not to beat the analogy to death, so
Yes.
that becomes really obvious to everyone that's in the know. And so it's sort of like, who are you trying to convince with your school? You know?
Right. And I think a lot of it has to do with who you gravitate more that you've learned from. Like another analogy, music. A lot of us here are musically inclined in some way or another. And, you know, mine's guitar. And I've got a lot of sources that I've pulled from that, you know, I like a lot of different genres. My main would be Joe Satriani. I actually learned how to play better guitar just by copying his music.
Predictable.
Right. Right. But at the same time, I have developed my own way of playing, but I also know that, you know, I harken back to it's, you know, blues, rock, some orchestra, you know, a little bit of
He's
opera.
hard to play. Wow.
Yeah, you know,
That's high level
but
stuff,
I
man.
gravitate towards those guys, and I wouldn't say that that's my style of playing, but it's what I gravitate the most to. But I don't sit there when I'm playing and sit there and go, okay, now I sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan. Okay, now this is John Lee Hooker. Oh, okay, now this is B.B. King. Okay, now this is where C.C. DeVille from Poison comes in. No, I just play. You know, I don't always have to cite every source that I've drawn from. I just let it happen because now that's a part of me.
Okay, so, and I guess I am a bit intentionally playing devil's advocate just for the sake of what it is that we're doing and what we're recording.
Mm-hmm.
That's another phenomenal analogy. You're right, and you're actually making me rethink my original position. As a musician, I totally agree with you. You have these influences, and sooner or later, you do express yourself through your own style.
Right.
But again, I say, what if what you're playing is note for note a Joe Satriani song? Or you know what I mean? Or whoever, it's an Elvis song, whatever you want to pick.
Right.
Now,
Right. You're always
doing
gonna
him, I agree with you. There is a filter there. It
Mhm.
will be different than exactly his song. Totally agree.
Right.
But to be like, this is my jam when everyone else is going, we went to the same concert, Mike. What are you talking about? You know, like that, you know,
Right.
yeah, you're playing it your way, but it's weird that this is a cover album. I was a cover musician for a long time. I played pub shows. I loved it. It was fine. Zero pressure. Only played songs that people like to sing along to and drink beer to. Cool, easy breezy, no problem, you know. But I don't think I ever had a flyer that was like, come see my art. You know, like this is other people's art, man. You know?
Original songs,
Right.
and then you
Right.
play
Oh,
nothing
yeah,
but Beatles,
right.
right?
I wasn't gonna make an album out of that.
Right.
So as you guys were talking, I was thinking about it. If you're gonna do the thing that you're talking about, Kurt, where you say, no, this is my thing, right? The people that are in the know, you basically have to isolate yourself from those people. So instead of trying to like, oh no, I'm gonna do this big thing, no, you actually have to cut yourself off from a lot because you can only go to people that aren't in the know, right? That's what I see people do. They end up finding these smaller circles where they can I'm gonna only I'll deceive these people because everybody else who knows I can't deceive them. You guys already know, so I'm not gonna try and trick you. So I'll cut myself off from you people. You often see that they end up having. I'm just gonna have my circle. I'll just have my people with my school, right? And if they can make it work, they can have a circle that didn't know. If they can keep it going for long enough, they can make that work. But they have to cut yourself off, you know.
Yeah,
I definitely,
wholeheartedly
for me,
agree. And that feeds into so many of the larger things we see as far as how martial art schools operate or individual communities operate, where, you know, for want of a better word, things can get kind of culty or something like this. You know what I mean? There's a lot of identity stuff going on in there and ego things because, yeah, in this person's town, they truly are the only source of knowledge. And they're able to say, well, I learned this from Bruce Lee's best friend. And, you know, oh man, this is a big deal. And there's no context within that community for so have 20,000 other people or whatever it is, which doesn't make it any less important to that individual, by the way. I don't mean to minimize that, but they don't have that perspective in context to understand what that means, you know.
Right.
And with Hollywood or whatever media being what it is, particularly from our generation, we've been inundated with images of somebody, you know, whether they're doing wax on, wax off for 6 months before they get to learn their first martial art technique, or they travel and have to go up some mountain and present you with a flower so that we can finally start training. You know what I mean? There's so much like pseudo mystical baggage or whatever that, and so much gatekeeping as a concept, that the layperson comes into martial art assuming that you had to do XYZ thing, you know, that there had to be some great grand barrier to entry that you went through, as opposed to you paid the door fee and you went, which again is not nothing, but it doesn't carry with it the same kind of, I don't think at least, the same kind of weight, where, yeah, like they're this sort of the lone torchbearer for this information.
Right. I mean, you know, we're kind of getting into intent, which I think is something that's really important. So, you know, we're intent and communication. So intent of what is your intent when you're saying this is my art or my thing? And then, you know, are you intending to deceive? Are you intending to make a claim to this? Or is this just a bad communication where you're
Right.
just, because, you know, think about it. I think with some of the things you were saying, Kurt, you know, when we discussed if an individual pops up online, which is, you know, the cesspool of online, and says, okay, this is my system, my filter or whatever. And like you said, and we just saw Punya Sombrata, the way we all learned it in the most basic form. And you go, okay, the first thing a lot of us are going to do is, let's just fucking Punya Sombrata. You know, so you're just
specifically
like,
my point.
Yeah, exactly. So you're just like, okay, this isn't, so even we might be missing maybe what the person's trying to do because their communication of what they were trying to do is a little off, you know, as in, and I think, you know, when you're doing the stuff we do, especially considering, you know, we're all doing things with multiple arts, multiple backgrounds, we're all kind of dabbling in different things to different degree. And so there's a lot of crossover. So I think it's important that when you're presenting to, present the idea of like, this is my background. But, you know, like you said, we don't need to get in the car every time and say where the fucking driving school we went to was. But it should be somewhere known. You know, let's say you operate a school or you're online, your biography should be up there. So, you know, so we're kind of clear as to where you're getting this from. And if there's something that's kind of unique or you think is a little different that you're popping in there, that, you know, let's say, I was talking to the guys actually before you popped on, Kurt, about Punya Sombrata, since I brought that up. And there was a particular thing I was doing with students that is not sort of canon exactly, so to speak, when you feed, say, an angle 7, the forehand thrust in there, as opposed to the slashing angles. And there's a lot of ways of dealing with it. And one of the ways that I've done is I've kind of taken something away from the normal way, or one of the normal ways, which is doing a gunting to a cambiata, coming around and throwing the puño. The problem with that is if you trap the person's hand on top, they are now not in a position to continue that flow. They're going to have to you're either going to have to let them go, which may be a bad habit on your part. They may have to have the skill to be able to sort of freelance a bit to get back to the drill. And if they don't, the drill comes to a halt. Or this was something I picked up from Grandmaster Nene and his Balintawak. And the way he does agak with you is he will put your hand in a position to defend properly the next thing he's doing. that might not be strategically a smart thing to do when you're fighting someone, but when you're drilling and you want to flow, that is an important thing to do if the person is a more minor student who might not be able to deal with the thing you're popping at them if you give them too much of a question, there. So what I do is I turn their hand over. So I'll sort of enter my hand underneath, pinky up, turn their hand over. So now they're in the correct position to raise the stick and block. And so is that original me? Kind of, but not. It's a principle that comes from GM Nene, and it's a thing I'm applying to a drill that I've gotten from Guru Dan Inosanto. So I will tell you exactly that. Yes, no one has done this that I've ever seen before. And there are advanced people at the academy go, oh, wait, what was that you did? That was kind of cool. I didn't see that one before. And I'm like, well, I don't know if other people do this or not. I've not seen this, but this is where I got this idea from. So I will acknowledge it 100%. This is some maybe original thought that was stimulated to me by these sources. So this is not me inventing something for Punya Sombrata. It's me trying to keep a flow going. And that sounds convoluted and complicated, but it's fucking true. So I'll be honest with you,
First of all, can we do an entire podcast series where we just nerd out talking about details of complex flow drills?
Yeah,
no, seriously. Greg Nelson is a good example.
Whoever's still listening is super into that, and I'm one of them.
Exactly. We've lost a lot of people there.
No, that's awesome though. I'm here for it.
The comment that another 25
I think your hand is supposed to. No, I think I do have to say the point of intent being such a significant part of it is maybe the most important point to be made on this subject, right? Intent matters so much. If we're seeing somebody else, I think had referenced this point in the Facebook group, but like if you're seeing a snip, maybe Mike Yuskiw might have been you, a snippet of what somebody's posting online, they may have in that class or in that seminar, whatever the little blurb that they're posting, they may have already done that, and that just didn't make the cutting room floor. You know what I mean? Or just didn't make the final edit rather. That may have been said. It might be that every one of their students is well aware of where they get it from. And I have to own the fact that if I make reels, it's not like every reel I post, whether it's spoken in the video or even written in the caption, I'm not necessarily always connecting every dot back to every teacher I've ever had. Every student in my gym will tell you I am very actively doing that in the written curriculum, in the lessons as I'm teaching them. I'm constantly citing sources because I want them to know the roots and the history of everything that we're doing. It's important to me as a teacher and as a student. But I'm maybe not putting that message out there in the same way in a virtual space. So that's fair. And that intent of going like, look, my intention is to help develop a sense of flow in my students via these exercises. Right now, my priority isn't trying to teach them the history and the source of it, because that's just not what we're doing right now. Right now, we're being practical and functional in how we're using this exercise. And I don't want to get bogged down in the weeds of constantly having to reference everything, I do feel like there's times I don't see very often, I guess, in fairness, I don't see a lot of guys acting as if they made it up, right? I'm not seeing in the handful of examples that might come to mind, I don't recall anybody flat out lying and saying, I learned this from some blind peasant in the mountain or some convoluted thing, you know what I mean? And in fact, they got it from an Inosanto seminar. I'm not seeing flat out bald-faced lies about stuff. It feels a little like a lie by omission. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it feels more like a lie by omission in that regard, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? It's bursting at the seams. Certainly it happens. But you get what I mean. Like generally speaking, posing the question in a generic sense, I don't think there's a bunch of people out there just fabricating stories all over the place, right? Or if they are, that's working pretty well in their school, but they're going to get called out on social media because everybody's going to know the answer. So it's not necessarily that. it's just, I also said this in the post. I'm coming off of 6 months of building from the ground up a completely new Muay Thai program for my gym. I've been in curriculum building mode for half of 2024 at least. I have the foundations for a new FMA program that I'm building specifically for our community where I live. So I'm in the laboratory for all these different things.
Yeah.
And I'm finding through this process how much it matters to me, where if you look at a curriculum sheet, it will say Rick phase number 1 through 5, blah, 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 blah.
Bingo.
Or, you know, the Thai Boxing Association's 18 count or something. Like that's the name of the exercise because I make it up. And I want my students to know that this is important. This comes from something legitimate, comes from someone that's important to me and should be important to them. And they understand with more nuance what the exercise is. Is that going to make them better at fighting or anything? No, and I don't really care about that part. When I'm saying this is because I want them to understand where it comes from, and because I want my teachers, if they look at the curriculum, to be proud and to not have like, yo, man, why are you acting like you're kind of leaving the rest of us out or whatever. I don't want that, and so I'm trying to be true to that. And so I think part of it was just being a little bit maybe bratty and in my feelings of going, yo, I just did all this work month after month after month, week after week, day after day to make sure I did this right. And then seeing somebody try to boost their brand with a video. And I'm like, you mean to tell me you could just not give a shit and just do it? You know, like then why did it take so long to try to do it quote unquote right? And then the question being, does it matter? Am I the weird one? Is there even right or wrong? Or, you know, am I just
you're right. They look exactly like you're saying they look. He looks exactly like you say he looks. That's the thing about it. Like you said, it looks ridiculous. We know where it comes from. So I can create like a kickboxing class, and I can call it like, I can have my own little thing. I'm going to call it like Hero's Journey Kickboxing, right? I like the hero thing. That's great, right? You take it, you know, I might mix my, you know, kind of, I'm doing Savate now. I mix that in, right? But when someone asks where it comes from, yes, I'm getting it from these sources. Like I might just kind of brand it that way. So like if someone doesn't care where it comes from, it has a catchy name to like get you in the class. But all it is like that 7 o'clock time slot. That's the Heroes Kickboxing class. But like I said, if someone asks, oh, where's this come from? I'd be the first one to say, oh, it comes from, you know, ABC. Yeah, you know, no problem. That's where it comes from. There should be no hiding that, right? So I think someone doesn't have to, like, we get into the history. We like that kind of stuff. Like, oh, I love this what's different? How is this style different from that? Oh, well, is that from a different region? Like, we'll get into that. If someone's not into that, like, hey, let's just work out, man. Let's just work out. You can call it something different. You just get on with the workout, right? So the branding, I think, like you're saying, if someone brands it a certain way and calls it, I want to call mine, you know, Eagle Fang. I'm going to call mine Eagle Fang from now on, right? But so what's behind Eagle Fang? What is that? Okay, well, it's this. I get this, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I learned from this guy, that guy. It should be right there. Almost page 1, it should be easy to find. So if you're doing that, I don't think there's any problem. If it looks like you're saying intent, if it looks like you're trying to hide it, that's different. Like you think about like Eddie Bravo. Did he really change so much of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that he wanted to name it something different, like all these different moves? Well, maybe that was enough of a different perspective that he used a different like nomenclature. I'm just going to use my different terms. We all know what we're talking about, right? That may not be ill intent. He's not like redoing BJJ, but I want you guys to know what I'm saying. When I say this is what I mean. Because to some extent, that's another level to it, right? Language. Like if you get out of like my own school and you go inside of that, like curriculum stuff, you know, we're using words like, I think you guys remember seeing Chris Brown making jokes with his satire piece, Jeet Ninja Do, right? Instead of calling something an
Those
armbar,
don't know that's a joke.
yeah,
Wake the fuck up.
he was calling an armbar an arm straightener, right?
Yeah.
And intentionally mispronouncing or miswriting Royce Gracie's name, like Royce Gracie or something like that. I forget, but he was calling an arm straightener. But it makes it a joke. But you think about it, is there any need to call an armbar something else? I mean, if we're really thinking about that Jujikatami, see, there's gatekeeping with the language. Well, this is where you could use your Quack Sensor 2000 that could actually kind of work that out.
And Mike, what was the coupon code for if somebody wants to access the Quack Sensor?
Oh, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe and hit that bell to get more. We'll put it all in the comments below.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I was looking up we were talking about like throws, like judo throws with the guy I worked with, and he was talking about the Japanese. He was joking that was gatekeeping. You don't know what these words mean. And I was actually looking up a few of them. Like for example, ogoshi, the O is big. So if I know the Chinese, I'm looking at it going, that's a big throw. So you can see like for example, small inside reap is kochi gaishi, right? And I don't know that Japanese term, but you look at the Chinese, it literally is small inside. You can see the small inside there. So if you know the Japanese, small inside, you see that in a few things: big inside, small inside, big outside. So how much different labeling would you need for some of this stuff? Like think about fitness. Think about this is a tricep extension. There are also nose bleeders. There are also skull crushers. Like how many different names do you need for things? As long as we know what we're talking about, you don't always need different names, right? So I think,
but your duty is to your students, right?
yes.
So your duty is to your students. So maybe you do, maybe you know, if I'm going to start using a bunch of Japanese terms and I'm somewhere where they don't have a lot of exposure to Japanese people, you're just talking a foreign language. You know, a great example actually of this is Kenny Johnson in Bolt Wrestling. He's got some amazing terms for things that you will remember. He calls one thing 300, and it's a particular move that you're doing that looks like a fucking pose from the movie 300. Or he'll say Elvis 73, which is, you know, Elvis in the karate pose. It's a particular move that you're going into. Or he goes, you grab the Elvis 78, so it means you're grabbing them by the fat around their you know, or he'll say one of them is called the Heisman, and we all know what that pose is. Now, at no point has he ever said, "I'm reinventing wrestling," or "This is my wrestling." No, he doesn't say that at all. He's just come up with terminology that is really easy for you, the student, to remember. So, and is he dictating that all of wrestling should use a terminology, or they're just wrong? Which is the bullshit that we run into online with everything. Oh, you didn't get a term right. Oh, or
Sure.
This word is not a real word, which is the, you know, Filipino martial arts insanity battle all the time, when it's like it's a different language. It's like you're literally telling me that agua is not a real word. It's called water. It's like, okay, you know, you can't argue with people.
Yeah, I think it has to do with your audience coming up with relatable terminology.
Yeah,
you know, just in that
which
sense.
exactly what you're saying is like your priority is to your students. I mean, you know, in thinking of somebody like Rick Fay, he always is somebody who's like, don't come to me for the terminology names. He always jokes like I'm Norwegian. We didn't speak a lot of Tagalog in my house growing up. You know, like I can't be your expert for that. You know, I will do my best to tell you what I remember from my teachers, you know, and I'll do my best to honor that.
and also
But a
just
lot of the
real quick, Kurt, like in all fairness, in the Inosanto Academy, we don't speak a lot of Tagalog either. And I mean that in the terminology. I've had person who spoke Visayan and Tagalog, and they said, okay, what Guru Dan is giving for terminology is about 65 to 70% Visayan. So if you're a Tagalog speaker and you're going, these words he's using aren't real, it's not your language. That's why. And then there's another like 25, maybe 30% that is Tagalog. And then there's a good 5 to 8% that Guru Dan's using that's other stuff. Like he likes the word umbak for wave, which is Aklano. That's his father's dialect. So we're using one word from another obscure dialect. And then like somebody like Lacosta, well, this is a guy who's what I, but he traveled all over the place. So he's picking up all kinds of terminology that, you know, some of it's hard to trace where the word's coming from. But we know, like, yeah. So it's
my
just
point
like,
is I'm here for that. I think that's great. I do it too. I was thinking you're talking about Elvis, like Phil Norman in the Ghost system has footwork that's called Michael Jackson. We do an Infodia thing we call Elvis. I use a bunch of those little things. I like giving things and people nicknames. So at my gym, we have a lot of little inside joke names for things and, you know, song or movie references and quotes that we use to describe certain things we're doing.
If it helps, right?
Laugh. Yeah, it's a good
Describe stuff
teaching
differently.
device. It helps you learn or remember, and it
Right.
also establishes whatever the culture of your group is, which is super
Right.
important, right? Super important.
It's just another form of
I mean
communication.
is, if using your example of Puño Sombrado, a very specific drill set, right? Not an overarching concept or the idea of wrestling as a whole. Everyone should now use my term or something like that. But a very specific drill set like Puño Sombrada. And now I come out and I say, hey guys, I just created my style of eskrima. It's called, Kurt's Collie or whatever. And in Kurt's Collie, we do this thing called backhand up and down flow or in and out flow or whatever. And we were like, yeah, it's
Product.
Puño Sombrada, man. Like, I don't like, so just because you named it something different doesn't make it yours, right?
Right.
If I perform a Johnny Cash song and I change the name and I change the arrangement a little bit, it's still Walk the Line. It's still One
Right.
Piece at a Time. It's still whatever, Um, and that's the part that feels really messy to me, feels really sticky, and feels, quite frankly, very ego driven and motivated, and it almost like you're trying to pull a fast one on people. And that's where I start to get really maybe too much on a pedestal, but get really frustrated with seasoned martial artists, uh, because if that's where it becomes a slippery slope. If the whole thing is about you and you wind up effing up in some way, as we all inevitably will, now your students might have an association with this practice being associated with your shit thing that you did, or your bad
Right.
play, or your bad attitude or whatever, instead of you going, or the teacher going, hey, this is some of the great stuff I've learned. I'm proud, honored, excited to be able to share it with you. And then if that person winds up being an idiot, well, the information exists separate from the individual, right? And all of martial art is that. Martial art does not need us to really do much. It's just existed for all of human time. It's just this sort of nebulous thing, and we're all fortunate to be able to plug in and play a few notes of this song together or whatever. But the idea of, I don't know, like trying to plant your flag on the moon of martial art and be like, this is mine now, that's maybe my favorite analogy that I've thought of, is how absurd, like,
Right.
we put the American flag on the moon.
Did that? I pictured Marvin the Martian.
Yeah, well, I mean,
played this in the name of
basically,
art.
it's kind of what I'm saying, is we planted an American flag on the moon. All right, yeah, like, it's the moon. What do you own the moon now? It's
Right.
everyone's moon, man. It makes the ocean move. What are we talking about? So yeah, you put your stupid flag up there, but nobody thinks it's yours.
Right. You got to think big.
Yeah, and everybody seems there is a lot of that, and there is a lot of in service of the individual, of their identity, maybe their brand. And if one is doing that and they're inherently engaged in trying to market themselves into the same pool as everyone else in a virtual space, not in your hometown, but in a virtual space, right? And you're saying, well, this is my thing and it's really unique, but for a fact it's everyone else's thing too. In a way, I feel like you're stealing, or you're trying to corner the market by going, I'm the guy. This is my thing. And we're like, well, yeah, but everyone else is also trying to put their videos out, or trying to, draw some manner of success through social media or whatever it is. And it becomes professionally unethical, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, what's fun too is when they go both ways with it. So, oh, this is my thing. Now I'm going to show you this thing that I got from Guru Dan that no one else has. You know what I mean? Like, okay, but that's
of course,
not
right. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's always a interesting fence post pissing thing that we see every once in a while too. Like,
especially because they just gave it to everybody.
I'm like, well, other people do have it, first of all, but okay.
Right. Well, the same thing of the fact that, like, let's look at some of the examples we're talking. Okay, you're doing Puño Sobrado, you're doing something Espada Daga, or something with the machete. For most of us, which is a privilege, we're lucky for it. I'm going to guess most of us have not had a Zanzibar fight, right? Most of us have not had a nunchuck battle. Most of us have not. You know what I mean? Like that's not your reality. That's in some in reality, or I would do that in my system. What I do, my style of martial art is I do this. Oh, you do that, right? You chop dudes' hands off to make sure they can't carry their machine. Like, what are we talking about? You know, you've not done this before. This was something you were taught, or perhaps through research and development, it is a concept that you've developed, right? And maybe through sparring, you realized, you know what? I would do this if, God forbid, the circumstances came out, because I notice every time when I spar, this is the thing that I do. Okay, that I'll buy, you know. But again, when it's a preset inherited drill set, and it has to do with something as extreme as and as obscure as sword fighting another person, which is just not a very modern problem, you know, then it's not your reality. It maybe wasn't even your teacher's reality. So apart from LARPing, you know, apart from some manner of just kind of role playing, it seems like what you have is the ability to pass on a martial tradition, right? A martial tradition. And if we're not giving credit to the people that pass the torch to us, then what are we doing? What, you know, what's it all for?
Right. Yeah.
I
Well,
agree.
Yeah.
keep
Big on what we talked about earlier with intent.
So if it speak on that, then like what if somebody is trying to pass off information, or at least comes across like they're trying to pass off information as if it's their intellectual property, which is another problem inherently in a professional setting, right? And it's not their intellectual property. They got it from their teacher, who maybe got it from theirs, who got it from theirs, and so on, right? At best, we have the privilege of being the newest voice in the echo chamber, right? What is should we trust the intent of that person, give them benefit of the doubt, and assume that their intent is good? Or do we have a kind of responsibility as people that are also in this community, who were in that same seminar or whatever, were there on the day when they learned that thing, to call that behavior out and say, no, this is not okay. This is not yours, and it belongs to somebody else, and they should be given credit for it.
Well,
Kind of tough.
you know, that's a good question. Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
you know, I try not to let things like that bother me too bad, but you know, I don't think any of us do on the level of we're worried about us. I think we are worried about people who are starting to get into these things, not being misled in ways. So I think what we have is a responsibility maybe to assume that maybe I'm going to go by default that they mean something decent, that they mean something well. The communication is bad, so I'm going to ask a question, and I'm going to try to sort out their intent through questioning, but hopefully not in a nasty way. And I'm trying, you know, I'm working on that. So it's like, maybe, you know, we can ask things like, okay, and we can state, like, we know this drill. A lot of us know this drill. We are instructors under Dan Santo or whatever, you know, Ajahn Chai, whatever it is that the person's pulling. And you can say, what I think a good question is like, what unique new thing are you bringing to this that we don't see in the standard drill? And then just see what happens. You know, honestly ask them for an actually unique point of view on it, as opposed to, you know, the standard thing we're seeing. And their answer could be, that's not what I'm doing right now. I'm working on a basic thing. Okay, that's great. That's fine. At least it's.
What would your intent be in asking that kind of question? You know, like, it doesn't sound like this, but would it be, are you playing in the space of it potentially being like a gotcha question? Are you genuinely curious what their addition is?
Generally curious, especially if I don't know the person. I'd be generally curious. It's like, I want to see what answer I do get. You know, I suppose it could turn into a gotcha if the person's a prick. But I'm hoping it's not. I'm going to hope that it's not. I'm going to hope that you know, they're trying to present a unique perspective. And because, you know what, if they have a unique perspective on something we're doing, I would like to know about it. As we all, I think we're all looking to be a community. I know the four of us, and then, you know, as we expand out from the four of us to a lot of people that we all love and cherish that are our friends, we are a community that does exchange. Like, I want to see when Kurt has some new point of view, or even something he's discovered, you know, that I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe I saw that too, but then your point of view on it was like, wow, I didn't see it that way though. Or
Right.
Mike or Michael, it's like, you guys are going to bring something. So, I kind of want to look at people in the way that I look at you guys and say, I hope you have a unique perspective or something that's there that I could also have some value from,
Right.
That's what I
Right.
want my intent to be.
Yeah. Because it is going to be hard to police such a big community like this.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
God, I mean, look at the internet as it is right now. I mean, just with the Facebook posts that come out and the constant bashing and bickering that goes
Yeah.
on.
It's like trying to put out a fire in the mountains of Southern California right now.
Right.
Topical.
But but yeah, I mean, the intent should be just to find out what their true nature is. I mean, if they're going to be a part of this community, you want to make sure that they're going to be of high integrity, very honest. It's because they're going to be teaching people these things that, God forbid, they might have to use in a situation to protect themselves. And to sit there and say that they came up with something like this on their own, like, show me something what is it about it that's unique, that's going to draw me in, that makes me want to learn from you?
Right. And that's going to be tempered too if they do. Like, okay, I'll use an example. I think that maybe I when we were kind of chatting on the chat with this. So there was a time when I was doing Siko for Siko Hubad. He got Hubad with my friend and training partner, Chris Bruce.
Mm-hmm.
And there is sort of a standard side switch where you would parry, take the elbow to center line. They would then, I'll use a Filipino term, bitad or tap down. Whoop style for you JKD people, and hit with an elbow, and then they'd hit with the other side. So it's in effect a switch from one side to the other. So that was sort of the standard one that I always knew, and the only one that I knew. And so Chris and I were down on like El Segundo Beach, and I parried his elbow and actually pushed across center line pretty hard. We were standing on uneven ground. So he just turned it into a spinning elbow, to which I parried, did a gunting, and fired the opposite elbow. So we all of a sudden found a spinning elbow switch to Siko for Siko Hubad. Fun as hell. We were excited, super excited. I run back and, hey, Guru, look what we invented. And he goes, that's really good, Timmy. Yeah, that's one of them. And I went, yeah, right.
That's one of them.
Done before. So, but my intention was good. My ego wasn't like, oh, look, I'm so super, I invented something. It was the way I felt, and it was the language I used, and then I learned a great lesson from it.
You
so
still discovered it.
Yes, yeah, I discovered it. So that's the word I use now. Look what I discovered. So that can happen, and that's legit. But I don't want to be that guy that when someone has one of those moments of discovery, and it's something I discovered 10 years ago, that I go, oh, that's nothing, blah blah blah, because that's being kind of a killjoy too.
Sure.
Right.
And discovery is one of the, I think, for personally, one of the most important words, right? Because there's nothing new under the sun, because a body is finite and can only do so many things, just because it's new to you doesn't make it new. Rick Fay has a great story. It's his to tell, but of a very famous martial artist that was a teacher of his, and they were knife sparring, and he got tagged by his friend and teacher that he was training with. And I think it was pretty early on. And he was like, oh, that was a good one. And the guy told him, just because I got you doesn't make it a good one. Right. We're like, oh, that's true. Like, oh, that hurt. Like,
wow.
Yeah. But it's like, that's such a valuable lesson. I feel like I've gotten that memo from Guru Rick countless times, but yeah, you've made a discovery, and that's yours, and that's important. And we have, particularly in the FMA community, teachers as gurus that are, if they're the kind that I like, they really are acting as guides, right? They really are trying to, as Guru Nasano says, create an environment where the answer reveals itself, right? That's the job. And so you want your students to make discoveries, and you want them to share their discoveries with their students if they become a teacher one day or whatever. That's super important. And within the context of going, again, to use Puño Sobrado as an example, we have a drill set that's been passed on from generation to generation, or Hubad to your other example. Within the confines of that, you made a discovery. That's yours. And you don't have to then figure out who else did it before so you can give them credit. No, that's yours. And you might, when teaching, go, you know, what I like to do is this one. And by the way, it doesn't really matter what I like to do. You're going to find what you like to do. But as an example of this, I think this one's kind of cool. Or I'll tell my students, if this follow-up to this thing feels natural to me, it's why we do it a lot, but I want you to figure out what feels natural to you, right? So they have awareness of, yes, I do have input in what we're doing. My own experiences are influencing what we do. I'm not just parroting and echoing other people. However, the platform in which I discovered this, Punyo Sombrado, Hubad, etc., is something that very much I didn't create. It's not my Kali. It's not my JKD. You know what I mean? It's a teaching and learning device I'm lucky enough to inherited, from which I'm developing my expression, right? If Mike gives me a bunch of paints and I paint a picture, you know, that's a shit analogy. Cut that out.
Quack sensor.
You know, whatever. I am expressing myself, but I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do it without him giving me that thing, is the point I was going to make, you know. And so much of, particularly when it comes to drill sets that act as platforms from which other things attributes are developed, it's a slippery slope, right? And there's only so many of those, and we all have them, and it becomes a shared language amongst the initiated, you know. And we're able to, all of us could get together and just jump right into playing Hubad and not have to learn that, and be able to just jam out and discover things together from one another, or naturally, organically as a unit, and that would be awesome. But I think it would then be lousy if I went out and said, this is my style of FMA, and I gave it a clever name, and then I taught everything that we all discovered, and I acted like Hubad was my thing, you know. Well, it's not. It's everybody's thing.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's always the quick answer. It's like, well, if you invented that thing, how the hell did I know it? Because I'm not your student.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, at least on the day that I posed the question, that specifically what you just said is what was going through my head. I was also very sick and just grumpy, and which I also put in the post of, you know. Part of my problem is, you know, I'll say to you guys, like, I'm not going to do this stuff anymore. I don't want to have these conversations with people, you know, like I'm too busy training. I'm too busy at home. And then it's like, it'll build.
Yeah.
It'll build. And then finally one day I'm like, F everything. People are annoying. Martial artists are the worst. I want to call somebody out. I can't stand this shit, you know. That's mostly my me problem, you know.
Yeah. No, because there's nothing that
don't everybody disagree at once.
Yeah, well, no.
I today. So
that
I agree.
Is a legitimate reaction. Everything, you know, that you said is legit.
You finally reach your boiling point and just have to say something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like part of it is like, you know, if I'm frustrated with it, it could maybe be a little bit like, well, I'm just seeing if anyone agrees, and maybe I'm being a little bit of a shit, and I don't totally mean it. Which is a thing that annoys me that people do, so I shouldn't do it. But the other side of that is I am sometimes curious, is this just a me thing? You know, is this something I'm just fixated on because it's a pet peeve, or because I just spent 6 months in the lab building curriculum, so it's on my mind, where maybe 6 months from now I wouldn't even notice it, or I wouldn't care, you know. I just thought it was an interesting topic to sort of take everyone's temperature. And I mean, the reviews seem to be, the responses rather seem to be, for the most part, that it's the intent that matters. People should be citing their sources, and that's always been a problem with martial artists. Is another thing that was very common for where the feedback goes. As well as a very justified bit of like, I don't know who really gives a shit, which is probably the best response. Hopefully some people care because you're listening to this episode.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's a lot of funny stories. Like, you know, we've probably all seen stuff where you're looking at, okay, let's say FMA, and there's somebody suddenly that's doing a thing. Let's say box pattern. It's a very particular thing, box pattern sombrata. And you're like, wow. And they throw a whole different name on it. and you're like, that is a really sloppy version of the thing that Guru Dan did here. And it's almost like, did this person watch this once or twice, either in person or on a video, and then thought, that's a great idea. Let me throw another name on it and then say it's part of my system too, which I think is part of what you're kind of talking about. And it's been done by some pretty big names, and I'm looking at it, and I find it just entertainingly funny. And I don't think less of the person that I'm thinking of in particular, because it's a pretty, well, they're not even with us anymore, but it's a pretty honorable grandmaster. But at the same time, like, you just kind of stole that from Guru Dan. But okay.
Right. I mean, at what point do you police these people, say something without sounding overly critical or overly douchey by, hey, that's really not how that's supposed to go? But then at the same time, you're trying to make sure that these people aren't doing a disservice to others by misrepresenting or misinforming others. It's like, we're part of a big community, and it's like you're teaching people these things that not only are supposed to develop coordination and reflex and such, but a technique that they could use, and then possibly have to use it. And then it's like, fuck, that didn't work for me. Damn, but I guess we'll learn this from so-and-so, and nobody called them out. So maybe it is right. Maybe it's not, so at what point, where do we draw the line on policing and being such critical people and not say anything? It's like, this is a fine line.
Yeah. And it's funny, like, because we were talking about terminology. So there's some terminology that once you know the history of it, you start to understand who's stealing, right? Mm-hmm. So the funny thing is, do you guys know the history of the terminology Heaven 6 by chance?
Yeah, as far just based on how Guru Asano taught us what it is, but yeah.
Well, I mean, but
his mom,
his mother. So because the term was like, when you translated it, because he'll say it in Filipino, and then which I'm gonna guess Visayan maybe, and then so when he translates it to like 6 blows that come from heaven, and his mother went, holy crap, that's too wordy, just call it Heaven 6. So then when you have a system that's absolutely unrelated to Guru Dan, go, and we call this Heaven 6, you're like, okay. Sure you do.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, you can only just sort of chuckle at it, it's like,
and that's a good point though, like, because I previously, and a good segue to something I wanted to ask, because a lot of what I'm trying to do right now, by the way, is just pose questions to you guys. I'm not speaking to my own opinion, like asking at what point do we police people. I'm not saying we should police people at all, actually. I think on a, like, especially publicly putting someone on blast and naming them, I'm not even necessarily comfortable with that idea in general. I'm just curious your guys' take on that. And to your point of then that terminology being absorbed by more people, or because maybe it just becomes commonplace and people lose track of where the term comes from. So maybe they're not giving Guru Asano credit because enough time has passed and enough hands, it's exchanged hands enough that they just don't know that that's where it came from. And that's, what do we say? What do you think of the people that say, look, once you teach something publicly, particularly online, where it lives forever and the audience is worldwide indefinitely, once you teach something, it belongs to everyone else, right? You don't get to have ownership. That's not your IP anymore. That's not your thing. Once you share it, it's open for everyone now. Do you guys agree with that? And how does that impact some of the stuff that we're talking about right now?
Yuskiw, we haven't heard from you for a bit. Let's let you talk first.
So I think it's it's interesting because we don't really have sort of like one major text where like this is the official name for this. Isn't Heaven 6 called like Lameko 1, 2, 3 in Lameko? It has a different name in Lameko, doesn't it?
Yeah, and then Paquita Tertia does as well. It's the 8
right,
count.
or it's like Kali 1, 2, 3 or something like that. Anyway, so yeah, I think and this goes back to what I was saying about the Eddie Bravo thing. I think when you're seeing some of it online, I think one of the best ways, like sunlight is the best disinfectant. I think one of the best ways we can play it is to try to have if you have to have an interaction with these people online, I think, and we've seen a lot of this stuff in, the pandemic. We've had all these different groups that kind of come up, these different conversations come and go, right? There's different sides that people kind of draw lines. I think one of the best outcomes, when some of this stuff gets into these spaces, is to make sure that we still look ethical and they can act in any way that they want. Hopefully they'll act ethical too, but if provoked and asked questions, they're free to answer them any way they want, right? It's better if they kind of look moral and ethical as well. But I think some people's behavior, you give them rope and they hang themselves with it. I think that's kind of one of the best ways to kind of approach some of this stuff is you can ask a question like we were saying earlier that you're honestly curious. Like this goes back to the idea of complimenting someone's video and saying something nice instead of trashing it. It's like, hey, that's pretty cool. There's something different in there that's different than the other drill. That's just an honest inquiry, right? And a lot of that, if you almost give them the benefit of the doubt, and then you can say, okay, let's see what they do, right? I think that's a pretty good way to approach some of this stuff, because everybody sees certain behaviors online, right? You can let those things speak for themselves.
What about
All right.
Mike Perez?
I think there's a moral responsibility to make sure that we credit where we get the stuff that we're putting online instead of just stating that we created it on our own, and making sure that we credit the source and that we're performing it to the best of our ability and our knowledge, that we're not misrepresenting where we get it from and how we're doing it. Because like you said, once you put it out there, that's forever. And there's just no way to erase it. So you want to make sure that what you're putting out there is of good quality, integrity, morality comes into play with all this stuff. And, it's your face that's being put with that. So you've got to, there's just this moral responsibility to make sure that you're just being responsible with it.
But to the, and I agree wholeheartedly, and I appreciate that, to the idea that once you share something, it belongs to the ether, it belongs to anyone that was listening. Or maybe another way to conceptualize it would be, you teach an exercise, a drill to one of your students, Mike, and then you find out after the fact that they then taught a couple of their buddies that, and then they're doing that on their own, right? That's actually a pretty great thing, in that martial art and its various elements exist outside of us, right? And in some of these cases, it could be 1,000 years old, 500 years old, 100 years old, 50 years old, whatever, older than us as individuals, that we get to just kind of continue to boost the signal and the echo and make sure that it continues on past us, right? Do you think that once you share it, it belongs to whomever you've just taught it to? Or perhaps would you maybe feel a little uncomfortable, like, yo, you just learned this from me, hypothetical student, and now you're showing your friends, and you're even kind of acting a little bit like this is your shit, like what you should have done is had them come to class, or like, do you have any take or any feelings about that kind of thing, where now it just belongs to whomever has received it?
Well, everything that we teach someone is going to belong to them to a degree, but as long as they're not trying to pose it as playing the instructor, just, oh, look at this, check this thing out that I just learned, this is really cool. And if the person wants to learn, I would hope they would try to steer them in the direction towards me. If not, and this person wanted to show them a little bit, I would, it's a slippery slope, because you teach them something, you're imparting this on them, and you're hoping that they're going to have this moral compass to do the right thing, in the sense that they're teaching the correct technique, the right foundations and fundamentals of it. But if not, and the person has a question, then steer them towards you. It's
which sounds a lot like Tim's example, by the way. I'm sorry to interrupt you. It sounds a lot like Tim's example of seeing somebody do what looks like maybe not a very good rendition of something that they learned from Guru Dan. And then, you know what I mean? And going like, oh, you just didn't stay with it long enough. And now
Right.
you renamed it, and it's something that you teach your black belts because it's this mysterious high level thing or whatever. And you're like, it's actually
Right.
not quite that, you know. There is a certain amount of trust that we have as teachers that we
Mhm.
have to have, you know, sort of
Yeah.
implied trust in our students that they're going to handle this with care.
Right.
Uh,
It's like the telephone game. You know, you say
yes,
something on
yes,
the phone,
yes,
and as it goes on down the line, by the time it gets to the 10th person, it's not even the same story anymore. But you
right,
would hope that when it comes to a technique or just this drill or whatever you're teaching this person that you're imparting on them, that they're going to try and keep the essence, the true essence of that there throughout the entirety of it as it gets passed on. You know, and then that's kind of hard because I'm pretty sure that, I mean, look at the many different factions of karate that has come out since what, 3,000 years ago, and just how it's changed over time. And I'm sure they found little minute things that they can change it in little details, you know, to sharpen it up or make it a little more crisp. And I mean, that's just with every art that's come out since the creation of fighting, you know? So
yeah.
it's,
That's a great point because I can even think of examples of things that I teach that, like, I'll flat out tell my, you guys know me, I'll flat out tell them I do it this way because I'm not very good at it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand this very well yet. I have gotten a lot from it, so I want to share it with you guys, and I want you to take it to a different level than I do. But like
Mhm.
trapping as an example, I don't necessarily teach trapping as a fighting thing. I teach it as a I always liken it to speed bag. I teach it as something that will make you better at every other area of martial art.
Right.
Double stick. I don't have a lot of experience sparring or trying to apply double stick. I see it as the same thing. For me and for my students, it is very specifically an attribute development area,
Mhm.
right? That's the context in which I present it. I'm honest that there are other people that will F you up with this. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean it's not good for fighting. It doesn't mean,
Right.
quote unquote, it doesn't work, whatever the hell that even means, you
Right.
know? Not at all. And I know a lot of those people, and I can tell you, and I've seen it happen, you know?
Yes.
And yes, trapping is very successful when they do it. It's a thing that I absolutely love, but I don't know whether or not I could pull off this thing in some scenario. It lives for me in this area, and that's how I want us to present it, right? But if I
Mhm.
don't say that, perhaps they only go, oh, well, trapping is just an exercise that gives you hand-eye coordination and a different level of awareness of lines of attack. And the next person goes, well, trapping is just a coordination thing. And the next person goes, we do coordination trapping. And the next person doesn't do it at all because who gives a shit? You know what I mean? And it's like,
Right.
yeah, but 3 steps back, I told you I have a friend or a teacher who will smoke you with this, you know,
Right.
who has very much done this in a real world scenario. I'm trying to be honest about my own limitations in an effort to give you permission to recognize your own and try to advance through them.
Right.
I think you brought up a good point at the end of the previous comment, Kurt, when you brought up black belt. Like I think you said, I teach it to my black belts or whatever.
Yeah, because I've met a lot of guys who specifically do that. They'll rename some kind of drill and it becomes part of their like high level curriculum. For
Right.
better or worse.
But a good use of belts, like Michael, when you were talking about like when you guys were talking about someone doing a drill, like the example of you teaching a drill and then they're teaching their friends. So
Mhm.
we want some of our students to be training outside of class. We want them to be excited about training. I think a good way, because I remember kind of using this kind of thing when you're teaching kids, right? Because you might be teaching them some, like think about at Premier Martial Arts, for example, in the self-defense area in Krav, they have a couple sacrifice throws. Like if you're escaping from like a rear naked choke, you do a sacrifice throw where you step behind the person, you know, take them down, whatever. But not everybody does that one. So if maybe say for example red belts just happen to be in a class that was like, you know, all black belts and we're doing the sacrifice throw, when they start teaching it to some other, when they start showing it to other belts, like, hey, remember that's a black belt technique, I wasn't even supposed to show you that yet. So you can kind of throw the rank thing in a way to be like, hey, remember that this is a little bit higher technique. So you're, you know, all the techniques, these lower techniques, you're good on. Like, you know, you have no problem. You know what I mean? So you can kind of throw like levels in there. This particularly works better obviously with kids because adults, if you kind of tell an adult, hey, that's not on your level yet, like they might take it wrong. But you can kind of almost peg techniques on a skill level and say, remember, this stuff is more advanced. There's some details probably missing. You know what I mean? So you can kind of that's one way to address it. That's not really like it's not a shot at them, you know. There's just people working things on different levels. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Take a mixed class where you have different skill levels. Some people are just trying to get whatever the thing is. I'm just catch and cover and fire back. You know, the other one is working the timing and the defense and maybe other biomechanic things, so people can work the same drill at different levels. And you can definitely tell, you know, without hurting their feelings, you know, that's different levels to this stuff, right?
Sure. And exactly to your point, that's part of what makes seminar learning so unique in contrast to regular classes, right? You know, again, if we use Gurun Asano as an obvious example, we have him telling us, you know, I have everybody from kindergarten to college professor in the room. I have to teach in this sort of, my word, like a buckshot spread here and make sure everybody's getting something. Well, now you have somebody on their first day that's attempting to do a black belt level thing. Usually that person is just mind blown, don't understand anything that's happening, mental fatigue and everything. But you'll have maybe a middling level person who goes, you know what? I picked up 3-4 parts of this. I'm going to make that part of my curriculum now, because that's all that they were able to get from it. And it seems so in that context, a Dan Asano doesn't necessarily have the ability to regulate who's going to access this information, what they're going to do with it, right? And that's a very old Eastern concept in general, which is, you know, once you say or do something, you don't have any right to impose your will on what becomes of it, right? Once you put something out there, it's just out there. I wonder, Tim, from you, and I'm not asking you to speak for him, but you are the one that has experience in truckloads of being with Dan and Asano in a weekly class context, right? In that format, in that setting. And with
Yep.
the limited exposure I've had to his weekly classes, they do feel an awful lot like seminars because he's just brimming with
Yeah.
knowledge all the time, you know. But do you think that, you know, and you've also assisted him in his traveling seminars, do you think he has a sense of, boy, I hope people are treating this information with a specific kind of respect? Boy, I hope people are giving me credit, because he is just no ego, you know, he's so humble. What do you think? What's the maybe the vibe or whatever that you get from him? And is that different within the context of a curriculum at the academy?
Oh, interesting question. First of all, I got to ask you, is that the Dos Manos shirt on that shelf behind you that I gave you? Looks like a Filipino flag.
That's just the flag.
Oh, okay.
That's just the flag. I do have your shirt. It's in the other room. But no,
I was
that's
gonna
just an actual flag.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I know I got the flag, and I'm like, is that the Filipino flag or is that the Dos Manos shirt?
Yeah, no, that's the actual flag. Yeah.
If you want a Dos Manos shirt, look at Martial Arts Lifestyle Magazine.com.
Yeah, I do wear that shirt all the time.
I know. I see you with it. It's awesome. Okay, so let's get back to your question. So you got a couple things going on there. So I would say,
yeah, I guess first, not to interrupt your thought process, but just to kind of like maybe be more concise with it. Part of what I feel, and I know you feel like this a lot too, is protective over someone like Gurun Asano when I see other people seemingly take credit for what he's taught them, and
right.
we're all aware of where they learned it. Does he even care? In which case, why am I dying on this hill?
No, it's a very good question because it comes up. So he will talk about stuff and he will say things like, it's out there now and people are doing it and they don't give credit to it. And then he'll say, but that's okay. So I think he has a little care about it, but I think it doesn't keep him awake at night. Let's put it that way. Because I think he is a person quite clearly, he comes from an academic background. He comes from a family, I think, and group of people that do honor where things come from. So I think he personally, as we know, gives credit where credit is due. He talks about where he gets things. He gives us the best history talks and stuff all the time. So I think he's kind of saying like there's two things here. One, if I were doing it, I would do it this way, but I'm not, and that's okay because you know what? The information itself is more important than that other part to him. So
That's amazing.
yeah, so that to answer that part of the question, that's how I'm going to answer that. And I think that's the truth. I think that's 100% the truth there. I think it might, bother him for half a second. And then you go, hey, Guru, you want to get a coffee? Yeah, sure. And, and he's over it. So it's not like he's losing sleep over it or anything like that. I think he's more happy that, how many of us are doing Filipino martial arts now as compared to when, he first started bringing it out. Like it's amazing, it's an art that really was sort of hidden and just handed down from family members to close, to family members or to close friends of the family. That's how he words it. So, it's become an art now that people can access, which means Filipino culture is then accessible. And I think he's more happy about that than he is about any not accreditation happening at any level. Because I think for the most part, most people are. So that's, and he does concern himself with things getting out there incorrectly. For instance, he's been doing a lot of work, and he got Hubad Lubad with us recently. And he will say that, and again, I think this could be either people did misunderstand or people are just communicating this improperly, where he'll say that people, and it took me a while to understand what he was saying, because he said, okay, we're doing 1 for 1, one FOR1, Hubad paradigm. He goes, and people say this is Hubad, but it's not. And I'm thinking, what do you mean? I know it's Hubad. And what he meant was, that's not the only thing in Hubad where people are saying this, and only this is Hubad. And he goes, no, there's more. It's a larger drill. And it took me about a week of him saying that for me to figure out that's what he meant by that, because I was getting a little confused by the way he was wording it. But I understand now. So there's Seek the Path. There is one FOR1. There's one number 4-1. There is all the ways of intercepting the one in the 1-4-1. There's 2x2. There is punch for punch, which would be like a 5 for 5, I guess, if we want to stay with angled numbers.
Even the double tap cycle, like the double pocket cycle,
exactly,
is still a component of Hubad. It's just a completely different generator.
Yeah, doing a collar tie in grip, like basically a Muay Thai clinch. That is Hubad. That's part of Hubad. Doing a pummel, like in wrestling, that is part of Hubad. Wrist wrestling, bicep pummeling. These are all Hubads. They're actually part of it. So I get what he's saying. Elbow Seco for Seco, this sort of stuff. So I get it there. And so he does have a concern about things not getting out there improperly, but I think he's also, resigned is not, which sounds negative. He's not resigned. That's not the word I mean, but he's accepting that that's a fact. But I also think what he's doing, what I may think he's doing is Guru Dan likes to, I think, plant subtle bugs with people so that they have a choice. Like, for instance, he had, I'll give a more personal example. So I remember when he and I were training with Omreban, which you do. And it was one of the days coming back from Long Beach. And he said, Timmy, which I think is hilarious. And, I'm so much bigger than he is. And he calls me Timmy. He goes, Timmy, I think it would be really nice if someone could help them organize into an organization and blah, 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 blah. And so what he's saying, the way I interpret it is, hey, I would like you to do that because I trust you to do that. But he was also saying it in a way without saying it that way, because if I didn't feel I was up to it or I didn't want to do it, I could go, yeah, that would be nice if someone did that. And there'd be no harm, no foul if I didn't do it. So he gave me a choice, but at the same time, he was subtly telling me, I think you're perfect for that if you do that. So I'm helping them do that because I picked up the message.
And isn't that always the creating the environment so the answer reveals itself? You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
He knows very well that's a situation where you might be somebody where a month later you're like, guess what, Guru Dan, I just made a decision all on my own that I'm going to help him organize, and he pat you on the forehead. Like, oh, good for you. Knowing full well he planted that seed.
Exactly. Well, yeah, fortunately I'm wiser than that. I'm not the wisest guy in the planet.
Totally understand. Yeah. But he is that person, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, he is willing to do that,
And so I think that bug is being planted when he's saying that in class, like, if you have the chance, if you run into this situation individually, you can help correct it person by person. And will it ever get fixed? I don't know. Doesn't really matter. But now, you know the truth, and if you want to help fix that, you can. If you don't, it's no pressure, no harm, no foul. That's what I think, is going on there. So
I love that, by the way. I'm so grateful for that answer, for the response. I'm glad I thought to ask the question. Not to diminish Mike or even myself, but we could cut the rest. Let that
yeah,
the whole episode right there.
Don't diminish Mike Perez. They're all him.
Well, just that, like, that's such a great response to my initial post, which is, and of course, because it's Grunasano, who's just it's just a kind of wisdom that, whatever, we all get it, but that the information is more important, right, than the attribution at the end of the day. We all agree that there's a right way to do things, and that it's kind of a slippery slope on what the wrong thing is, and we all maybe have our own take, where the line lies, and that's part of what my initial question was, is where do we all individually and collectively think that line is. But at the end of the day, the more important thing is that the information lives on. The more important thing is to make sure, if anything is being policed, for want of a better word, it's that we're helping keep each other informed on what the information should be, what it's intended to be. And if you're changing it, that you have very good awareness as to why you're changing it, and that's an informed decision, not one out of accidental ignorance.
And it is
that's
meant
phenomenal.
to be. It's meant to be adaptable. And I'll throw this bug out here, because we were talking about it a bit in our chat, because I think it'll blow the minds of people a little bit. And I'm not meaning to blow anyone's mind, and I'm not meaning to point fingers or jump on anybody or police anything. Just expand your mind into something to think about. And one is, so look at, if you're an instructor under Guru Dan in Kali, look at what your instructorship says. It doesn't say a particular style. It says in the Filipino martial arts. So it's kind of a generic term. It's not in Inosanto Kali. It's not in Inosanto La Costa Kali. It's not anything like that. It's just the Filipino martial arts. And then think about this too. On top of that, at no point at any level of instructor are you allowed to create instructors under him. Only he can do that. So now you're an instructor, but in the traditional sense of there being, let's say it was Shotokan. If you're a Shotokan instructor, you now have the ability to make a Shotokan, ranks under you. But we can't make ranks, especially in something generic, right? But you're an instructor. Okay, so what does that mean? Here's what I think that means. I think that means that we are in charge of interpreting the art in the way we see fit and disseminating it in the way we see fit. And that way is not his way, it's your way, but give credit to his way, right? Give credit to him being your instructor. So if I'm going to rank people in something, it has to be my thing at this point, as far as that's concerned. As far as, like, if I went and got a teaching credential in something else and they authorized me to do it, then I can't. But in that particular thing, it's a generic term of Filipino martial arts, and which there's a whole conversation I was having with Renee Susim. You guys, he's a student at the academy. You guys probably know him, the Empty Hand Filipino martial arts group. Really good guy, and really interesting conversation that might be something. I'll throw the topic at you guys. It might be another good one for this, but we are looking at, we've got this great exposure with someone like Guru Dan, because we're a product of, he said 32 systems, which is kind of like what he was covering in his book, but the reality of it is about 50, because he said he doesn't say every single one of them, because there's some people he only spent a couple days with, but he did pick up something that's influenced him in this way. But so has oh my gosh, well, I'm losing the name of the guy that's the founder of football, basically, back in the day, who was a football coach to him.
Amos Alonzo Staggs.
Amos Alonzo Staggs, yeah. So he influenced Amos Alonzo. Thank you, Mike. I don't know
nice name drop.
Yeah. So Amos Alonzo Staggs has influenced us in how we've learned material from Guru Dan. So are we the Amos Alonzo Stagg style of Kali? No, but that influence is there. So, I mean, he acknowledges all these influences. So, and he's taken things, and this is his knowledge that he's handing on to us. Now, we are gathering knowledge from him, but we are also gathering knowledge from others because he's encouraging us to do so. He's bringing, if you're at the academy, he's bringing those people to us, seminars.
He certainly is the example of giving credit where it's due by virtue of him famously being known as the guy who highlights other people,
right?
Who flies somebody in from another country so you can learn from them as well. Exactly. Even in like Bladed Hand and some of these documentaries where you get the guys in the Philippines that are like, that's the thing that they're talking about with him, is like, you got to give credit where it's due. This man really tries to boost everyone else's signal,
Right.
And it's
so that's kind of saying, like, you can't hand on his thing. You're not authorized to do it in that way.
Right.
You have to do it your way, and you will have to kind of put your name on it. So,
please go ahead.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, so that's what I mean, and my own sort of personal biography in 2019, he and Paula and Cookie told me to do that. They literally said, it's time for you to create an organization, write your own curriculum. So you and I have been in the same boat of writing curriculums, and you guys have read mine. It does the same thing as yours. I'm like, this is where this is from. So I'm not looking to bullshit anybody on where anything's from, because I don't want to be the gatekeeper. I want people that, if I want them to go and explore Guru Dan and Omri Ban and Ajahn Chai and Win Zinu or Kathy Long or Grandmaster Nene or Grandmaster Attilio or any of these people that I've studied with, or anything that's coming to me. I want to make it clear where it's from, because you might want to go study with them, or if they've passed away, their students or something. It's like, you might want to take a deeper dive into this. So I don't want to gatekeep in that way. So there's that duality of, I think we are responsible to disseminate the information, but we are also to be honest of where it comes from, but also that it is through our filter, using the term that I like that you used on the original post. Yeah, it is through my filter.
Well, and I think too, I have to recognize, it's worth saying out loud, if Guru Nasano is the guidepost, the best example of somebody who gives credit where it's due and always kind of shines, like boosts the other person's signal. In fairness, I don't think every time I've done Puño Sobrado, let's use our example, with him or because he's teaching it at a seminar or something like that, I don't think the message is, all right, well, so we're going to do Puño Sobrado, which I got from this person, this time, this day, but you know what I mean? Every single element along the way, he's not citing those examples. He's just in general creating like his whole culture that he's presenting is constantly giving credit. So the more specific question that I had, if I'm seeing somebody post a video of a thing that we all know and they're not giving credit, in any of that person's defense or my own, if I post my video, he's not doing that either. He's not giving credit on every individual drill. He's just constantly giving credit, and I think you guys have really shined a good light on maybe having a little faith that stuff is happening off camera. It just happened to not make it into the video, and not like always come at that thing of like, well, what the hell, that's not just yours. Like, that's fine. That's not the point of the video,
Yeah. It's like, hey, if you're putting it on YouTube, type the shit in down there, man. Put your credits.
Right. Honestly, and part of me kind of wants that. Part of me will look through the caption and go like, this is where I feel like you should have mentioned you got this from so-and-so. But it's kind of so what? This has actually been mostly, you guys, what I've tried to do with this episode and with being fortunate enough to be part of this podcast when we do it, this is free therapy. So I go to you guys and I have weird martial art triggers and trauma and problems, and then you guys help me just calm down and okay, thanks. and then I
Yes.
need to be around. So thanks.
Think about this too, like that where we run into the Discord with some JKD folks is philosophically what JKD is doing, and we understand what Bruce Lee's was wanting to do, but there's also then the goddamn denial of something that's really obvious. So, and what I mean here, let's take the example of, we look at it and we go, yeah, there, Bruce Lee looked at some Savate, there it is. And here's some Wing Chun, and here's this, and here's these things. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. Like, yes, he did. Here's the points of it that are very clear, because we want to acknowledge that. We are about sourcing. We are about looking at it. And,
Right.
but at the same time, you can learn these different things. And then the expression is not copying it. It's like you've gotten it into your nervous system. And what comes out when you move and when you fight, that's not a style or a collection of styles or hopping of styles or whatever. That's an expression of movement that you've learned that is now in your nervous system in a way that your body is feeling appropriate, because hopefully you've drilled and you've trained enough that that's what it is. At no point do I really ever think anyone's going, and now, ooh, I shift to Kali, and I shift to this, and I shift to that. I think most folks, and maybe there's one that they prefer, and so maybe most of their kickboxing looks more like Muay Thai. Okay, well, why is that a problem? I don't get that, and they'll acknowledge it. But it's like we know. Guru Dan has said many times, I was sitting there with Bruce Lee when we watched 8mm films of Savate fights, and he turned the film over so he could view it in a right lead position. And then he goes, I came back 2 days later, we're training, and I'm like, well, isn't this Savate we were doing? And Bruce Lee would say, it's the essence of it. So, and I understand what he means by that. Yeah, we're not doing the exact drill or the exact thing or this or that or throwing our arms like, you would in traditional Savate. So he understood this thing and did it. Well, sidekicks are sidekicks. There's an aesthetic to certain ones that look in styles, but it's still a fucking kick that is coming this way on this plane. So, to sit there and deny that, I think is what drives us nuts with what we're talking about here. So I don't see what's wrong with saying, yeah, it was looked at and it was it was absorbed, like the board, right? JKD is the board. Okay, if we're going to start Star Trek, right? It's a bunch
Good way to look at it.
Yeah, it's a bunch of different individual things that get assimilated into one thing.
This is where I admit I've never seen Star Trek.
But at the same time, bring it back to the point of giving credit to the sources.
Yeah,
sure.
Because about him studying Savate, and he credits some of those movements to Savate. That's where he got those from. So again, we're back to sourcing material.
Yeah,
right.
And I guess to kind of bring home, bring home like to where I was starting the thought process initially in posting about it, was looking at specific drill sets, looking at very specific exercises.
Right.
That, Tim, you had the right word. There's a certain aesthetic to it, watching Savate fights and going, oh, they kind of operate, it seems from what I can tell, this is kind of their MO. I'm going to see if I can play in that space and see what I discover. What can I mine from that? That's awesome. That's amazing. That's my favorite thing to see people do or to try to do on my own. And definitely whatever you do mine from that is yours, right? You discovered it. It came through you. You were motivated, inspired by, informed by this other thing, correct? But if you found that thing and didn't credit Savate for that discovery, I personally wouldn't have any problem with that, because it was just a cause for you to go on the journey. If, however, there was a specific exercise that Savate has all of their students do all the time because it helps their hip flexibility and their precision with a toe kick or something, just making that up, And now in my kickboxing program, I put that in my curriculum because I want my students to have better hips and better precision with toe kicking. I should call it the so-and-so Savate exercise, this such and such Savate drill. You know what I mean? If it already has a name, use that.
It's from Savate.
What's that?
To say, or you can call it Jennifer if you want, but just acknowledge that it's a savate drill.
And that's what I was going to say. Yeah, if it doesn't have an existing name, call it whatever you want. But it already existed, and you're using that tool for a purpose,
Yeah.
right? Acknowledge that that's a pre-existing tool, and how lucky we are to have been given this tool for this purpose, right? That I think is super important. You didn't create Puño Sombrado. You didn't create this hypothetical savate exercise. You inherited it, and you're using it for this reason. Call it
Yeah.
what it is, but anything that comes to you as a result of that exercise is completely yours. That is sort of the context of where I was coming from to begin with. And while I still think that that's true, this has been really, again, enlightening and understanding, like, yeah, at the end of the day, though, what's more important, somebody calling it XYZ savate exercise, or the idea that the information is being passed along,
Yeah. Yeah.
otherwise it just dies. It dies with us.
Right. Right. What's more
Yeah.
important, the technique or the lesson learned from it, the
Right.
sharing the essence of it. Right.
Right.
So I tend to, at the question you had earlier that everyone was answering, my short answer on it is, I think, and I believe the same way, just sort of the way U.S. law looks at it, you can't copyright movement. You can copyright a performance of movement, but you can't copyright movement. Movement is too utilitarian. So, in my opinion, once you put it out there, yeah, I don't know if it belongs. It doesn't. It belongs to us when we can do it and we can pass it on. That's the way I look at it. It's accessible for all of us to play around with, and I've got no problem with that. I would never want to say, oh my God, you can't do jab cross hook because I'm the one who put it out there. Like, oh geez, okay, come
Right.
on.
No monopoly on human.
Yeah, exactly. So, once you and especially considering I'm a person that's as guilty as everyone else at looking at someone else doing something or learning something from someone, going, holy shit, that's really good. I want to incorporate that, but I don't pretend that that's not what I did.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. And that authenticity is the biggest thing to me,
Right.
And as I've said countless times with you guys, in so many different ways and so many different conversations, of authenticity about what your priority is as a teacher. And that's maybe another element to keep in mind with this topic is, if you have somebody who's teaching and they're going, look, man, my priority is these students do have to deal with violence on a regular basis because they are employed to do so, or that's where we live, or whatever the circumstances are. Not even talking about hypothetical violence, but real threats to safety and
Right.
life are active in their daily life. I don't care what you call it. I don't care where I learned it from. None of that matters, because my priority for my students is that they develop actual skills because they might need it tonight.
Right.
That's a fair point. My take is, so you might have somebody that says, I don't care where it comes from, what the history is. I just want it to quote unquote work. Or you might have somebody that goes, I don't really care if it works. I'm trying to perpetuate this cultural artifact. I'm trying to ensure that this movement practice lasts longer than any of our individual lives, because it comes from so much further back than our individual lives. So
Yes.
you're able, in air quotes again, to do this, it's not my priority. My priority is the culture, the history, and the transmission of this data, and then there's every other version that we could think of. And so long as the teacher's being authentic, and, if I'm teaching this as a cultural and historical practice, and therefore my teachers and its origin are of the utmost importance, I need to also be authentic and go, I'm not saying this is the way you beat up the bad guy tonight at your job. You know what I mean? Like, I'm being authentic, saying this is the context in which I'm showing you this. This is why we're working on this. And in that setting, then yeah, I guess I'd better damn well cite my sources. Otherwise, what am I even doing? I'm just
Right.
creating my own weird thing.
That brings a great example of a friend of mine. So there's a workout program that I've been doing for 20 years. And, I'm not the kind of person that wants to get into bodybuilding. I don't care about having big muscles, just as long as I'm strong and able to take care of myself. And this program that I follow allows me to work out once a week. Okay. It's called max contraction. Now, there's times I'm at the gym and people are looking at me and they're just like, what the hell is it you're doing? You're not doing a full range of motion. It's all these strong range partials and whatnot, or these holds. And I'll explain it to them. And they're, and some people are very authentic in wanting to understand what I'm doing. And then I have another friend who, and I'll cite the book and I'll explain to him, this is what it is. This is the author. This is why he does it. If you want more information, who that can explain it better than I can, go to this book. It'll give you the source for the material. It'll give you the scientific studies and the data on it, and help you to understand it better than I can. I can show you the exercises, the movement, and so on. But I also have another friend at the same time that will sit there and say, I don't care about that stuff. Just show me what to do. Just give me the movement. Tell me, I don't need to know the why. Just explain to me the movement and let me go from there. So it's that side of both coins where you want the people who want that information. You have those people that want that information that deep, and then the other people that just show me. So it kind of goes along with what you just Absolutely. Said there.
Yeah, and leaving space for both of those things to be equally valid.
Right.
Both of those sets of priorities to be totally valid. Everybody is wired a certain way, and everybody is after whatever it is that they're after. Yeah, and if they're going like 100%, I mean, it's a great example. Just all I want is the function. I don't care about the why.
Right.
That's always fair. And I'm somebody who is maybe too much so at times obsessed with the why. I really want to know that part. I am the person that would want to ask her, Dan, like, where does this specific exercise come from? I do want to know all that minutia. I am fascinated by it. I do want to walk all of this back as far as we can go. I'm doing my family ancestry right now and am just nerding out so hardcore about it because I want to follow all these threads,
Right.
And so, yeah, I think part of this is a learning experience for me as well to always remember that's not necessarily what everyone else is doing, and that's that.
Well, we are teachers of this particular thing. I think that's why we like it. And that I'll bet you could find something somewhere that you were never concerned about teaching or sharing, and you were probably just like that. Look, just give me the thing, so I can get the thing done or whatever, get the functionality of it. And it's like with the guy, type of person Michael's talking about. I doubt this person wants to go teach fitness. They're just like, they want to get
right, exactly. That's it. Just show me the movement, because he's not gonna sit there and turn around and try to show it to somebody else or teach them and have to explain the whole full enchilada to him. He just wants the movement. Where I have other people that are just, man, that sounds really interesting. I want to know more about it. What's the name of this book? Because I want to understand the science behind it. Okay, well, there you go.
Yeah, I mean, I've trained and taught defensive tactics for law enforcement and security, formally and informally, you know what I mean? Officially, in official and non-official capacities, and am familiar with that and had to utilize those things in a professional setting many, many times. The thing I've always found really fascinating is handcuffing. Right there's a joke there, but actual like the process and techniques that go into that. I don't think I've ever asked a teacher, hey, well, where did this handcuffing technique come from? I don't give a shit. I want to make sure I put bracelets on this guy safely so that I'm not going to get hurt, so that my partner's not going to get hurt, so that they're not going to hurt themselves. You know what I mean? Like, that's the priority. I don't care. Where's this first aid technique? Can you cite who was your first aid teacher?
What was the date of the creation of the
like, who cares? And again, martial art fighting and violence management, that kind of thing, exists in a sphere adjacent to, there's a Venn diagram there or whatever, to quote unquote martial art for me, and the martial art side, I feel like really is a blessing and honor to be able to engage with. So you should give credit where it's due, where that more functional side of the thing, maybe to hell with that. When shit hits the fan, that shouldn't really be on your mind,
Right. Yeah. And I think that's where it kind of, when you cross those worlds, it's annoying that guys that are doing some faintly Bud like material in the NFL right now have no idea that Guru Dan's the one that brought it in, and it pisses you off. But like, for them, why do they give a fuck? They need to be able to have more quarterback sacks. They don't care. Like, my knowledge of this history doesn't help me sack that quarterback.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, great example. Also a great time to mention Mike Perez's shirt.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. Look at you.
The listening only crowd is proudly sporting the correct Detroit Lions shirt.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, that's why I see Gus and John Day all the time. They're, Detroit natives. So, gotta say, I'm a local boy, so I'm a Rams fan, but I am pulling for Detroit. I want to see these last poor teams that have never played in a fucking Super Bowl actually get in there. I would like to see that.
Yeah.
It's it's super exciting I always joke I am like the poster child for a fair weather fan, and I have zero problem admitting that. I'm totally okay with that. I don't feel remotely bad about it. Because
well, why
what's
waste
happening,
your time? I get it. Okay.
yeah, well, what's happening is it's so good for the city, and it's like my 7-year-old daughter is really into watching who she calls the Blue Lions. So every weekend we've been watching Blue Lions together, and it's this new thing. We wouldn't have done that several years ago if if it was a shit team and it's not going well. You know what I mean? She wouldn't have fun with that. That's not fun.
Right.
So, anyways, well, I appreciate you guys being interested in talking about this with me. Like I said,
that was a winner. Once you posted that, I was like, oh yeah.
Well, yeah, I appreciate it. Like I said, in transparency, and I mentioned it in the post, a lot of it was just sort of being kind of in a grumpy cat Garfield kind of mood. And usually I try to be Odie, but I was having a Garfield day. And
you gotta have more Garfield days. I like those because that was, like I said, that was an amazing post.
Yeah, kind of grumpy.
I think you need a couple more.
Guy.
Well, no, I appreciate it, and as always, then the conversation is interesting. It's been enlightening because I'm walking away feeling actually very different than I did on the day about this topic. You know what I mean? Just through this conversation, going like, I think in a lot of ways what I was feeling frustrated at, I think I was wrong. And I think where I'm coming from is right, and I'm understanding a little better of where I was coming from. But yeah, this is super insightful. And I hope we do more of this. Hopefully people listening, if they're still listening, willing to comment or reach out to Tim or to anyone else with like requests or suggestions. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just because we took a season off and it's been crazy, but it's always nice getting together with you guys and chopping it up, and I sure hope everyone finds some value with it. So.
Same.
Yeah, don't get entertained at us.
Yeah.
Right. Just consider us 4 clowns that are full of shit. That's fine.
Yeah, right. But sooner or later we all wind up going like, I think we all learned something today.
Yeah.
We need 80s sitcom music to start playing.
Yeah.
Just, at the end of the episode
with the typical poses afterwards.
Yeah.
I'll throw that little the more you know rainbow with the star.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Yes.
The next step is to have an animated special, right? We just animate ourselves.
That would be awesome. Are you kidding?
Oh,
would be.
If you can figure that out, I'm in. That is awesome.
That's a bucket list thing officially.
Right?
We're talking like what kind of animation? Like South Park or like the frickin' Fat Albert or something like that?
Good question. Exactly. And then we have other characters that we do the voices for that come in as if they're not the same people, right? So sky's the limit on this.
We're putting that out in the ether. Any of you animators out there, come on, let's get it together.
Now we're just building a whole different show.
Yeah.
Correct.
Just building a universe.
Right. I got tons of voices.
Hey, there we go.
I gotta get
I think
that's not the same thing, Mike Perez. Just having a lot of voices in your head, you can do a lot of voices.
Hey, how about a video game?
They make medicine for that.
Like one of those universe video games like Minecraft. Can you imagine that?
There we go.
Oh yeah.
Martial arts Sims.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that would be hilarious, by the way. Martial arts Sims.
Martial arts.
Everyone's just immediately starting dojo cults.
Probably would be actually that much different from what we see online already. It's just that we'd actually see the characters up, characters do something, which could be actually very entertaining.
Turns into the old Nintendo Kung Fu game challenges.
Yeah. So they wouldn't just talk shit on the keyboard, we'd be able to actually
Hey, you go old school karate champ on them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. Best game ever. Well, I have a couple ideas for some stuff to look forward to for this year. Maybe just some kind of breakout episodes or little standalone things I think would be fun to do. But I'm looking forward to more of this format too, of us just taking the time to
out there. I think last time, we didn't do it for this time, but that's okay because we did this one pretty quick. But maybe we each take a turn at doing a lightning round question thing.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, Talking Heads is about, as far as the way it's made sense to me, is us talking through topics. You know what I mean? And really seeing at the end of the day where we all land on something that feels important to us based on what we see in the martial art community. And
again, where we post this, hopefully, you know, create a dialogue. If any of you watching wherever we post this, if you want to, you know, put your 2 cents in worth. I mean, hell, if you want to shoot a video of you doing your 2 cents worth and dropping it on there, that's great too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. We'll include it in the next one.
Yeah.
Yep. I think it's a great
saying
way.
that like just adding to your list of shit you have to edit, Tim.
Yeah.
Make a bunch of videos.
No,
We'll put it in the video, meaning Tim's
No.
gonna have to do it.
Drop it. Yeah. Don't give it to me, dude. Oh my God.
Send direct messages to Tim.
Yeah,
with
exactly.
your opinion.
You guys will never fucking see me again. I'll be under a pile of shit.
Any time of night. While you're at it, if you have any opinions on where things have gone wrong with firefighting, also let him know your take.
Oh my God.
And general city management.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
General city planning as well. Yeah.
Okay. Well, speaking of that, so the app just chimed in. So basically, the Palisades fire, so the one closest to me, is 13% containment currently here. 6:44 p.m.
Is that up or down?
That is up.
Okay.
Because I'll tell you what, like yesterday at some point or the day before, it was like 2% or 3%. So
Okay.
consider it's consuming an area that's like larger than the physical area of Manhattan at the moment. And you know, so if you guys there are particular videos that I've done. I kind of do a daily update down by the Academy. I've made those public so anybody can see them on my Facebook feed. You know, if you're friends with me, you can see the ones I've done more by my place, which is not far from the Academy, honestly, but closer to where the fire is. And then there was one that I shared the other day. It was a really cool 3D model, and it showed, because I think what's important is the topography, to look at literally what that looks like where these fires are. It's mountainous, it's hilly, it's up and down these valleys. So, you know, it's not exactly the easiest terrain to be marching in and fighting a fire. And it's forest. I mean, it's like, it's crazy. I've got a college buddy that has smartly like made his settings so people can't tag him. Otherwise, I'd have been tagging him like, you want to chime in here? Because he's a career firefighter who was Army Airborne engineer. And so he did this stuff. He was Las Vegas fire, but when we'd have fires here and we needed people coming in, he would come in and fight fire. So he's done this kind of firefighting before. And then he got into arson investigation. Now he's retired and just flies airplanes around. But, you know, he would be the first one to be able to tell you, okay, look, here's how it's really, what's really possible and what's really not. And the bottom line for me, my argument is just like, look, firefighters are firefighters for a reason. They have an expertise, and just trust them to do what the fuck they're doing.
And damn it, if they better cite their sources of where they learned how to.
That's right. Right. Absolutely.
I'm gonna make a scathing post about it.
Exactly. Don't make me get my degree in firefighting on YouTube real quick.
Let you know what's up.
What's wrong?
All right, guys. I gotta go wrangle children. I can hear them turning into pumpkins upstairs.
Yeah. Sure. Well, hey, it was lovely talking with you guys all together again.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Great times.
Share time with you guys.
Absolutely.
I don't know. Tim, are you gonna cut some of this up? It's long. We went long.
I mean, I'll start where we did the roll in, and I think we got a good hour and a half at that.
Yeah.
I think.
I don't know if you like chop out lag or anything like that, or
Nah, there's not too much lag.
yeah, okay, yeah. I listened to all the stuff we've done, but I can never remember, like, you know, like, is there parts where we were like jawing on that got cut or anything? I wasn't sure how that worked.
Nah, usually,
I feel like I was talking out of my ass a lot, is why I'm asking. So
no,
feel free to chop me up.
I usually put a warning up there. Warning: Kurt is talking out of his ass.
Okay, that's perfect. Yes. Authenticity, baby. That's all I'm saying.
Quack Censor 2000, baby. Quack Censor 2000.
Dude, maybe the thing I look forward to the most is your intros, Mike. Jesus Christ.
Oh,
Yes.
Tim and I work on
Very
stuff
good.
beforehand. We throw ideas around, and then I
Yeah.
surprise him with I add some writing to it at the end there.
yeah.
It's
The
a
idea-
genuine skill, man. For real.
Yes.
we need a
Every time I'm like, there's no way it'll be funny yet again. And every time, get the fuck out of here.
That's why I think we should do an animated thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's why I said, look, we once we lose Kurt on this, it's done. Got to keep him.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
We're gonna do
All
a
right.
Bob's Burgers, but it's gonna be Tim's Melmag, and it's gonna be all animated. We're gonna have different characters. It's
That's
gonna be
the
brilliant.
that's the best example. Yeah.
Yeah, love it.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's exactly the style and voice we would want. You're 100% right.
Beautiful.
All right, guys.
gentlemen.
I will see you in the chat. I'm gonna
Yeah.
I gotta go, unfortunately, but
right.
but yeah, I'd be curious to like start brainstorming another topic. This was
Yeah.
fun.
So,
Yeah, good idea.
plan if you got something you want us to talk about.
All right, y'all. Thank you. I'll see you.
All right,
All right.
guys.
All right.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Talking Heads podcast presented by Martial Arts Lifestyle Magazine. Support this program by hitting the subscription button on our YouTube channel, which is at Malmag 7404. That's at MALMAG 7404. There you'll have access to all of the Malmag shows, including the Talking Heads podcast, the Martial Arts Lifestyle podcast, the Martial Arts Lifestyle Special Edition podcast, the Martial Arts Lifestyle Alumni podcast, and all future shows. Check out martialartslifestylemagazine.com to read articles on the martial arts. You can also check out what events are happening worldwide, see places to train, and even purchase courses on our courses page. You can also shop at the Malmag store, where you can find a variety of Timmy B's brand sticks for FMA and Krabi Bong, as well as t-shirts and other items. Check out Kurt Cornwell of MKG Detroit and the martial arts he teaches at boomboxdet.com. That's BOOMBOXDET.com. You can also catch his YouTube channel at Coach_Kurt. That's at COACH_KURT. For information on Tim Becherer and the martial arts he teaches, check out DDTmartialarts.com. Links to these websites are provided below in the description, as well as where you can find all of the Talking Heads on their social media. Contact us at malmagonline@gmail.com if you would like to advertise or sponsor the Talking Heads podcast. Talking Heads theme performed by Arthur J. The Talking Heads podcast and Martial Arts Lifestyle Magazine are trademarked and copyrighted by TNT LLC.